The man in Section 14 wasn't celebrating. While 25,000 people danced with pure joy, he sat perfectly still, tears streaming down his face. Bob Marley noticed him from the stage during Exodus. And what this broken soldier would whisper next would create the most powerful moment in concert history. Oakland Coliseum Arena, April 8, 1978. The Kaya Tour was in full swing, and Bob Marley and the Wailers were delivering one of their most explosive performances of the year. The crowd was electric, singing along to every word, moving as one massive wave of humanity united by reggae rhythms and messages of love. But Bob's attention kept drifting to Section 14, where something didn't fit. Among the celebration and joy, one man sat motionless, his head down, his shoulders shaking with what looked like silent sobs. The man was William Billy Thompson, a 34-year-old Vietnam veteran who had returned from the war 8 years earlier, carrying wounds that no doctor could see or treat. Billy had been a machine gunner in the 101st Airborne, deployed to the jungles of Southeast Asia when he was just 19. He'd witnessed things no human being should witness, done things that haunted him every night. Billy hadn't wanted to come to the concert. His sister Linda had bought the tickets months ago, insisting that Bob Marley's music might help him the way it had helped her through her divorce. His songs are about healing, she told him. About peace. Maybe they can give you some peace too. But sitting in that arena, surrounded by all that happiness, Billy felt more isolated than ever. The music was beautiful, but it seemed to come from a world he could no longer access, a world where people believed in love and unity and the possibility that things could get better. Bob finished Exodus and stood at the microphone looking out over the crowd. His eyes kept returning to Section 14, to the man who looked like he was carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. "Wait," Bob said suddenly, raising his hand to signal the band to pause. The music faded and 25,000 people went quiet. "Someone out there is hurting," Bob said into the microphone, his voice carrying clearly through the arena. "I can feel pain in this room, and we don't leave family behind." Bob walked to the edge of the stage, shading his eyes against the bright lights. "Section 14, he said, pointing directly toward Billy. "Brother, what's troubling your heart?" Billy looked up, startled to realize that Bob Marley was speaking to him. People around him began to turn and stare. Linda, sitting beside him, gently touched his arm. "It's okay," she whispered. "He's talking to you." Billy shook his head. "I can't, there's too many people." But Bob wasn't letting go. "Brother, I see you. Stand up for me." Slowly, reluctantly, Billy stood. He was a tall, thin man with prematurely gray hair and eyes that looked much older than his 34 years. Even from a distance, Bob could see the pain etched into his face. "What's your name?" Bob called out. "Billy," came the barely audible reply. "Billy, can you come down here? Can you come talk to me?" Billy hesitated, looking around at all the people staring at him. But something in Bob's voice, something gentle and non-threatening, made him nod. The journey from Section 14 to the stage took several minutes. Security guards escorted Billy through the crowd, and people stepped aside respectfully, sensing that something important was happening. Some reached out to pat Billy's shoulder encouragingly as he passed. When Billy reached the stage, Bob knelt at the edge, bringing himself to eye level with this troubled man. "Billy," Bob said softly, "thank you for being brave enough to come down here. Can you tell me what's making you cry?" Billy looked up at Bob, and for a moment he couldn't speak. He'd been holding his pain inside for so long that the simple act of someone asking about it broke something open inside him. "I was in Vietnam," Billy said, his voice barely above a whisper, but somehow carrying through Bob's microphone to every corner of the arena. Bob nodded slowly. "You served your country." "I killed people," Billy said, the words coming out in a rush. "Kids sometimes. People who were just trying to protect their homes. I've been carrying that for 8 years. And I can't find my way back to who I was before." The arena was completely silent now. 25,000 people listening to one man's confession, one man's pain. Bob reached down and gently took Billy's hand. "Billy, what you experienced over there, that wasn't your fault. You were a young man sent to fight in an old man's war. The real enemy isn't the people you fought against. The real enemy is the system that sent children to kill other children." Billy's tears came harder now. "But how do I live with what I did? How do I sleep at night knowing I took lives?" Bob was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that would change Billy's life forever. "Billy, the fact that it hurts you proves you're still human. The fact that you feel pain for what happened proves your soul is still intact. You haven't lost who you are. You've just forgotten how to find peace with who you've become. Bob stood up and gestured for Billy to join him on stage. Billy hesitated, but Bob extended his hand, and after a moment Billy took it, standing on that stage with Bob Marley, looking out at 25,000 faces. Billy felt something he hadn't experienced in 8 years. Acceptance. These people weren't judging him. They were listening, understanding, feeling his pain with him. Billy, Bob said, I want to sing a song for you. For you and for everyone who's been broken by war, by violence, by a world that sometimes asks us to do things that go against our nature. Bob turned to his band and nodded. They began playing the opening notes of War, Bob's adaptation of Haile Selassie's speech to the United Nations about ending conflict and injustice, until the philosophy which holds one race superior and another inferior is, finally and permanently, discredited and abandoned, Bob sang. But tonight the words took on new meaning. Tonight they were about more than racial equality. They were about the war that had destroyed Billy, about the conflict that still raged in his heart. Until there are no longer first-class and second-class citizens of any nation, Bob continued, his voice growing stronger, more passionate. As Bob sang, Billy stood beside him, tears streaming down his face. But these weren't tears of despair anymore. They were tears of release, of recognition, of finally feeling understood. When Bob reached the bridge of the song, he did something unexpected. He stopped singing and handed Billy the microphone. Billy, Bob said quietly, what do you want to say to the world? What do you want people to know? Billy looked out at the sea of faces, all waiting, all listening. He'd never had a platform like this, never had the chance to speak his truth to so many people at once. I want people to know, Billy said, his voice growing stronger as he spoke, that war doesn't end when the fighting stops. It follows you home. It lives in your dreams. It changes who you are. The crowd listened in absolute silence. But tonight, Billy continued, looking at Bob, then back at the audience, tonight I learned that maybe I don't have to carry this alone anymore. Maybe there are people who understand that soldiers are victims too. Bob put his arm around Billy's shoulders. Billy, you're not alone anymore. Look around. You see all these people? They're your family now. We're all your family. Bob took the microphone back and began singing again. But this time the entire arena joined in. 25,000 voices singing together. War in the east, war in the west, war up north, war down south. There is war and the rumors of war. Until that day there is no peace. But as they sang, something beautiful happened. The song transformed from a protest against war into a prayer for peace. From an indictment of violence into a promise of healing. When the song ended, Bob kept his arm around Billy. Billy, I want you to know something. Your pain matters. Your story matters. And most importantly, your healing matters. Bob turned to the crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Billy Thompson. He served in Vietnam and he's been carrying wounds that we can't see for 8 years. Tonight, let's show him that his service mattered, that his pain is valid, and that he has a family here who will help him heal. The standing ovation that followed lasted nearly 10 minutes. 25,000 people applauding not just for Billy, but for every veteran who had ever struggled to come home, every soldier who had ever felt lost and alone. Billy was overwhelmed. He'd expected judgment, rejection, maybe even hostility. Instead, he found acceptance, understanding, and something he'd thought was lost forever: hope. After the concert, Bob invited Billy backstage. They talked for hours about war, about peace, about the long road to healing. Bob introduced Billy to several other veterans who were part of Bob's extended community, men who had found ways to transform their pain into purpose. Billy, Bob said as the night was ending, your war doesn't have to define you. It can inform you, teach you, make you more compassionate. But it doesn't have to control your future. Bob gave Billy a phone number, a veteran support group that met weekly in Oakland, led by former soldiers who had found paths to healing. Music helped them, Bob explained, not to forget what happened, but to find peace with it, to transform pain into purpose. Billy started attending the group the following week. It was difficult at first, talking about his experiences, facing his guilt and shame head-on. But slowly, with the support of other veterans, and the memory of that night when 25,000 people had listened to his story, without judgment, Billy began to heal. Within a year, Billy was helping to lead the support group. He discovered that his own experience with trauma made him uniquely qualified to help other veterans navigate their return to civilian life. In 1982, Billy opened the first veteran-specific music therapy center on the West Coast. The center used reggae, folk, and blues music to help former soldiers process their experiences and find healthy ways to express their emotions. Bob Marley died in 1981, but his impact on Billy's life continued to grow. The Music Therapy Center, which Billy named One Love Veteran Center in Bob's honor, has helped thousands of veterans over the past 4 decades. Billy, now 78 years old, still runs the center. On his office wall hangs a photo from that night in 1978. Bob Marley with his arm around Billy on stage, both of them singing into the same microphone. In interviews, Billy always tells the same story. Bob Marley didn't just give me a moment on stage that night. He gave me my life back. He showed me that my pain could become my purpose, that my wounds could become my wisdom. The most powerful legacy of that night wasn't just Billy's personal transformation. It was the ripple effect it created throughout the veteran community. Word spread about the reggae star who had stopped his concert to listen to one soldier's pain, who had turned a moment of individual suffering into a collective healing experience. Veterans began to seek out Bob Marley's music, finding in it messages of resistance, resilience, and redemption that spoke to their own struggles. Bob's songs about fighting against oppression resonated with men and women who had been sent to fight wars they didn't understand for causes they couldn't believe in. Today, war is played at veteran ceremonies around the world, not as a celebration of conflict, but as a prayer for the day when no more young people will be sent to kill other young people in distant lands. And in Oakland, at the site where the Coliseum Arena once stood, there's a small memorial garden dedicated to all veterans who struggle with invisible wounds. At the center of the garden is a bench with a plaque that reads, "Until the day when war is no more, we remember those who carry peace in their hearts despite the violence they have seen." Inspired by Bob Marley and Billy Thompson, subscribe to Marley Files, the untold stories for more hidden moments that shaped the legend. Hit that notification bell because we uncover the stories the world forgot.